Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Cascade session. Cascade is a raw black from Yunnan province, Ailao Mountains. We'll talk about that, but before we do, I want to talk about actions or things that occurred at the shop this week. And one of them is one of my favorite subjects. So we've got a young chap, very smart. He's been coming in since his high school days. And he had brought us a cake from Yunnan. And, you know, it was one of these beautiful cakes. It had red paper on it, glittering letters, fairy pixies on top of it. So it looked like it should be really, really good. And as I looked at the label, because it's a Chinese label, I began to discern that this was very possibly a blend. It was compressed cake, a blend from quite a few places in Yunnan. Typically, the blends, especially when they're from a lot of places, doesn't matter that all the places have famous names. It's a lot of places, that's the issue. And when it is nondescript in terms of which specific lot of places. So both the Bijou and I had some trepidation about this because so many times people bring us beautifully packaged tea. They want us to try it. And for a lot of reasons, we look at it and we know instantly, oh, this is market tea. And market tea has certain characteristics. So we're going to talk about this a little bit because this was a raw black. And so we thought, how are we going to handle this? Because even as we were looking at it, we thought, this is probably market tea. The young man comes in, we set up a certain time for him, comes in, and as a surprise, he brings his mother. And so we're all going through the tea, sampling the tea. This young guy has been coming here for 4 or 5 years. So he instantly grokked, this is not very high quality because we chipped off the leaves. The leaves were all broken up. It wasn't in a very, and it was varied in color, a bunch of things going on, which showed us right away it was market tea. And he immediately got it. What was even greater was he tasted it. He said, this is thin. And Bijou looked at it and said, yeah, this is plantation tea. So let me explain the term plantation tea. We use it because it's a direct translation of something that the Chinese say. They say tai di cha. And literally that's translated in so many places as plantation tea. I think a better translation would be market tea because it is run-of-the-mill, mass-produced tea. And this is what this was. And that's why the taste was so thin. Then to drive the point home, because he brought his mother also, we made a raw black from here and did it side by side. And immediately he said, yep, very much market tea because here, and this is the value of what you're getting these days, you're getting scope, you're getting context. This young man, as I said, has been coming for 5 or 6 years, since probably 14 or 15. And he really understood, oh yeah, this one has depth, it's clean, flavor is more distinct. So that's really what we're talking about for market tea. But there's more. When you have plantation, in quotes, market tea in China, what else do we think about? We have fear in our hearts. It's rare that we have fear in our hearts, but market tea brings fear in our hearts. Why? Because it's possible that it's sprayed. It's possible that it's rounded up, so to speak. These are dangerous chemicals, and these are the things that we're looking for when we are out in the tea fields. We know, either based on the appearance of the tea field or the age of the tea tree, when something has pesticides on it or they're using Roundup. By the way, I ask you the following question. What amount of pesticides meets the RDA, safety RDA? What amount of glyphosate, that's Roundup, meets the safe requirements for consumption? The answer is, as far as we know, 0. And so that's why we look and are so careful. And that's why we have fear in our hearts when people bring in stuff and we wonder, wonder what the fields look like. That's actually the very first thing that goes through both Bijou and my minds. Look at the stuff. That's very likely has issues with it. So as you're thinking about this, and there's really, once you know this stuff, in some ways, there's no real reason to consume stuff that has those type of chemicals in it. In fact, in some ways, it's irresponsible to yourself when you consume those type of chemicals. And it's even worse if you're serving friends. So that's one of the things to think about as you get tea gifts. Is this spray? How do you know, and how do you know it is? So raw black, we're in the raw black territory. Let's talk about Cascade for a minute. Is Cascade spray? Oh, let me think here. Let's see. Oh, it's from the forest. They don't have to spray because these are tea trees. And the tea trees have survived over 1,000 years without being sprayed. They don't need it. Okay, maybe they help them out with a little Roundup to get the other parts of the forest away. And the answer would be absolutely not. They want other parts of the forest. Oh, and by the way, who's the antecedent here? It's the indigenous peoples who live in harmony with their forest. They want and they understand that the forest works together to produce magic in terms of the tea. And by the way, also produces lots of Chinese traditional herbal medicines. When you go up to these villages, it's always interesting. You go for dinner, you look in the soup, and all these things you don't recognize. Now, as a Westerner, and a Westerner who spent so much time in China, I'm well trained to look down in that soup and say, I know this is delicious, and then just eat it. Because I know, especially in the indigenous areas, that they're putting good stuff in there. And in the Ailao Mountains, they grow quite a few traditional Chinese medicines. And actually, when you're walking through the forest with indigenous peoples, they'll go through and point out, oh yeah, this herb does this one does that. And then you look in the soup, sure enough, there it is. And it's delicious, by the way, too. You have all of those things going on in this particular area. This is a temperate forest. It's got lots of different tea trees in it. It's a World Heritage Site. It's got several different indigenous peoples that live in these forests. And in fact, long ago, and that is in 1949, when the communists came to power, they actually found indigenous peoples who really hadn't left the forest. And they helped over time integrate them more into society. That's really interesting because these people are really farmers / peasants. They're out there in the fields. It's the rural rhythm. It's the rhythm of friendship, the rhythm of wanting to try different things and exploring in their forests. These forests are very interesting. They have gibbons in them. Gibbons are a small ape. They have monkeys. They also have, for sure, leopards. It's been said that these forests actually contain tigers. I'm not sure that that's true, but leopards, they absolutely do contain leopards. So when you're working or in these forests, it behooves you to pay attention to your surroundings, because you don't want to climb a tree and then come face to face with the leopard. You know, it would be pretty bad if you climbed a tree and came face to face with a gibbon as well. Probably not a good idea to do that. So there's lots of interesting hazards in working in this forest. Have we seen gibbons in this forest? We absolutely have. And they are incredibly fast. And their territory ends up being incredibly large because they move so fast. They're not aggressive unless you make a mistake. If you threaten one, that's probably not a good idea. And if you're just quiet and observant, that's okay. So this is where this comes from. There is great water resources within this forest. Rains a lot. It rains to the tune of 50 to 60 inches a year at least. There are periods of time when parts of the forest are foggy. It's not every day it's that way. And it's just one of those environments that's just absolutely beautiful. You walk through the forest and all these plants on the forest floor are growing next to one another. And by the way, it's not just one varietal of tea tree. We only get tea here at Sophie's from one varietal, but we've always had our eye out for other varietals. And the reason we haven't gotten tea from other varietals isn't that they don't make tea from them. It's just, it doesn't meet your standards. Remember, we work for you. If it isn't good enough for you, it doesn't get on the board. So let's talk a little bit more about the process of raw black. Raw black. What's that raw refer to? It really refers to the fact it's not fully fermented. It's starting or is somewhere on the fermentation journey. The full fermentation journey, if it's a raw black in a cake form, is usually 30 to 50 years. The full fermentation journey, when it's loose leaf, we don't know. And we're doing an experiment here. Cascade is loose leaf. And it's loose leaf, and that came in 2017. So it's already 7 or 8 years old. And by the way, you're in for a treat next week because we've got a raw black that's over 17 years old. So let's get into the science a little bit more. And let's start with the process. Pick the tea. They're in trees. So you gotta climb the trees, pick the tea. After you pick the tea.
Do you feel good about the talk?
Yeah.
After you pick the tea, you also then wither it. And you wither it for a period, the farmers wither it for a period anywhere from 1 to 3 days. And really, they're trying to get the moisture content down to around 50% or so. It's a magic number that they're able to detect by smell and feel of the leaf. Why does it take so long sometimes? Well, sometimes it rains. When it rains, you can't wither outside, so you wither indoor. That's slower. It's not under sunlight. They try and always get it under sunlight. At some point, after it's withered, finished being withered from the farmer's perspective, they fry it. So when they fry it, all of you are thinking, oh yeah, that's like green tea. It's withered longer, but they're out there frying it. So what's the difference again between raw black and green tea in terms of frying? Fry it at a lower temperature. The green tea usually fried 300 or 400 degrees. This tea, the raw black, fried at 150 to 200. So really, they're trying to put the microorganisms into stasis. Not trying to kill them. You need those microorganisms to actually ferment the tea. But you don't need them while you're in process of also trying to change the nature of the tea leaf. So what does it mean to change the nature of the tea leaf? After frying, you actually roll it on very much like a bamboo tray, except it's cross-hatched. And you roll it for anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour and a half, something like that. And if you're really good, the leaves look pretty even. The smell is very rich. If you're like me, the leaves are any which way. Oh, by the way, a lot of my leaves fall on the floor because I'm a clumsy roller. But they're not clumsy at all. All of their leaves, as they are rolling them. This is hand rolled, by the way. They're still on the tray by end of rolling. And if you think it's easy, it sounds easy, doesn't it? You're taking a leaf after all. Leaf's not very resistant. You're much stronger than the leaf. And you're just sitting there, you have the music on, la, 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 roll. Didn't I just say for 40 to 90 minutes? Any physical activity for 40 to 90 minutes, you get tired. I got tired. Am I there yet? Doesn't this look finished? This looks finished to me. There's standards. You may not understand the standards as an outsider. I certainly didn't in the beginning. But it's got to look a certain way. It's got to smell a certain way. And really what they're trying to do is break down the internals of the leaf so that when it comes time to do the fermentation process, everything's going to get fermented relatively evenly. 90+% of raw black ends up in the cake. Very little of it ends up as loose leaf. Why? Hard as heck, inconvenient as heck to store it as a loose leaf, right? Whereas with cake, oh, just toss this in the cupboard. You don't toss it. You put it gently in a cupboard, close it up, temperature control. 50 years later, you're going to open it up. Doesn't quite work that way, but you catch the picture. So when you have loose leaf, you have to have space. And that's why when we started this experiment, we realized, oh, Bijou and I have to use house space. We have to temperature control that house space, which we both do. And after you have rolled it, what do you end up doing? You sun dry. you put it out in the sun. What's the purpose of putting it out in the sun? The purpose is to bring those organisms out and wake them up and get them started working. In the beginning, you actually are in a race and you don't even know it. You're not in a race, but they're in a race. Those organisms, microorganisms, get to work and so forth. What are they racing with again? They're racing with oxidation, because at some point, usually later in the process, how much later? Maybe 5 years later, oxidation starts to occur. And as it picks up year by year by year, more and more and more. So in the beginning, it's all about the fermentation, the bacteria, the molds, the yeast, the fungi. So where do these molds, yeast, bacteria, and fungi come from? Do they have starter kits? Oh, here, let me give you a starter kit. Wait. No, remember I said they put it in stasis in the beginning through heat, and then they wake it up. They come from the forest itself. These are the organisms that are in the forest. So every raw black that's done in the traditional way is also bringing microorganisms from the forest. It's all very particular. So think about this a minute. When you have a blend like that young man brought, what are you blending? It's not just the leaves. You're blending microorganisms, aren't you? And the varietals probably oxidize at different rates, right? So you're doing all of that stuff because it's convenient. It's cheap. Market tea, plantation tea. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing, it's single set of trees. Now, you could argue, and the scientists among you immediately had this thought. You thought to yourselves, well, wait a minute. He said over 1,000 years old, which means that these trees weren't monoclonal. And that also means each tree is slightly genomically different. And that would be correct. So I applaud your technical expertise for sussing into that. So the blends are still a blend, right? Blend of the trees, but they're closer. And the bacteria and the fungi and the mold are essentially the same because they're within this small area. And those are all going to have a distinctness or lend a distinctness to the flavor. Remember, in Yunnan, and everybody knows this who's in the tea business, in Yunnan, it's by mountain. Hey, bro, where's your tea from? Which mountain is your tea from? Oh, I got this Lao Banjiang. Old tree, Lao Banjiang. Oh, I got this Yiwu stuff. Old tree. In the tea business, among tea aficionados, among you, you know, you have context, you know where yours comes from. And that's really important because you know that there is a predictable flavor style from a particular region. And if you like that flavor style, that's what you will get. I have to get the Hokai. I like that. And it's predictable. The fungi, the yeast, the mold, the bacteria, and the actual tree varietals themselves, predictable. They're going to give you something that you like. You're excited when you have a new mountain because it's like, oh, I get to taste down into the bacteria, yeast, and molds and fungi. I get to understand, do I like these? Am I going to be friends with these? So that's what raw black is all about. So it goes through those 6 or 7 steps. At the final step, after it's been sun-dried, there's one more possibility. Actually, there's two possibilities. Am I going to compress and steam into a 357-gram cake or some other shape? Or does my crazy customer want it loose leaf? Or am I going to sell it to a factory, which is then going to fully ferment using the composting process? Which of these three things am I going to do? Which is going to net the most money? When you're dealing with tea trees, keeping it either in a cake or loose leaf usually nets the most money, especially if you're in a famous mountain. There are exceptions to this because some of the factory owners, they make craft cakes. And when they make craft cakes, they're trying to get it from one or two or three different mountains. And this is a marketing thing. And so therefore they're willing to pay more money for that because on the back end, they're going to net more money because they're going to market, oh, this is real special. We got this Iwu mixed with this Jingmai. Oh, nobody else does this. And you charge X amount more. Are the majority of tea drinkers in Yunnan drinking fully fermented or are they drinking raw black? Turns out they're drinking raw black. That's what they find interesting. The world outside of Yunnan finds the fully fermented really interesting. The world inside Yunnan finds the raw black truly interesting. It's a matter of preference. You know what? I like both. So I drink both. But I understand why there are differences in both. So that's the raw black versus the fully fermented black. Remembering that in the factories, the fully fermented black, it's a 45 to 60-day process. About. They make them in cakes, they make it loose leaf, same as the raw black. But it's very, comparatively speaking, quickly done. All right, let's see if I'm very quick. Oh, this doesn't look very quick to me. This feels like almost relatively slow. But it is my great pleasure to bring up the raw black brewing expert tea master, Biju. In red.
Right. Okay. Hello, good morning. Yeah, we do raw black simple from Yunnan. So temperature is one. I use the 175 degree, and also so loosely, so 5 grams each. Yeah. So if you like, the make the best flavor, we try together. Okay. So we use the junk. Yeah. Hopefully,
Use your tableau.
yes.
For you, it'll be 2 cups, a strainer. Those are the things that are required. We use an extra cup or 2 to cool it down faster, and we make 2 or 3 cups sometimes. We have a tea toy because we have fun in the tea shop. We have a tea tray to control the water. But you don't have to have anything except 2 cups and a strainer. Tea rhythm. What is tea rhythm? Tea rhythm is establishing a set of steps that you go through uniformly every time. When I say uniformly, you follow the same standards every time. So the first thing you do, you take water, whatever temperature, in between 175 and 212, and you're going to heat all the cups. You're going to make sure all the cups have no soap spots or any residue that could affect the flavor. That's part of tea rhythm. Another part of tea rhythm is you're going to preset your timer. And in this case, it's going to be 3 minutes. Tea Master is drying 175-degree water, which is already pre-programmed in our system. She's playing with the, oh, wait, she's not playing with the water. It looks like she's playing with the water. She's still in tea rhythm. She is aerating, dissipating the steam. And not in a hurry. And week by week, she observes the same steps. You don't see her go outside of those steps. You don't see her vary the order. And you should set your practice the same way. You can go fast or slow, but you gotta have order. And you gotta have order within the order. What does that mean? A process within the order. Pours the tea into the kettle so that she can control the pour into the cup. She's going to take the tea leaves, put them in, then shake and heat, try and get them heated up. And smell. And then she has a controlled pour. Timer is set for 3 minutes. Here's what you get. Beautiful set of leaves on top and a set of leaves on the bottom. Raw black always has, when it's done properly, especially when it's done from ancient tree, a distinctive flavor. And this will be no exception. Part of it has to do with the fact that as the trees grow, they absorb nutrients, they absorb at a chemical level information from other plants around them. And this is what ends up creating their leaf. Broadly speaking, because the watershed is so good here, and because there is great cooperation among the plants, you come out with a result that's really unique to this terroir. So the soil here is about 4.9 pH. So that means it's acidic. And you need that. Tea trees need that in order to produce good tea. And this is no exception. So one of the questions that's come up frequently is how do the indigenous peoples store the teas? When it's loose leaf, they store them sometimes in underground facilities. When it's caked, they usually store them in humidity controlled rooms. So they need to go through the same principles that we would go through here. One of the reasons we keep this stored in this environment is because we know this will make it last a long time. You heard that it would take somewhere around 30 years to fully ferment. Therefore, there's an expense to that. There's a space expense, there's an energy expense. This is why this tea, as it ages, actually gets more and more precious, because you're pouring in the care to make sure that this tea ages in the right way. Usually, when you're aging tea like this, if it's not loose leaf and it's in the cake, you segment a piece of the cake. A cake is round, right? 360 degrees. Oh, I'll explain this in a minute. Timer's gone off. You're just going to separate the tea water from the tea leaves. Not in a hurry, very steady. With the last drop. And this is what we have. Very distinct color, greenish yellow. Ooh, I smell this. Oh, by the way, glad I suddenly remembered this. The next 3 weeks, starting this week, are all raw blacks. So make sure you take the notes because they're very different. We go from Cascade to Newman to primordial forest. So let's enter the quality of reading. So you let it cover your tongue. 175-degree sip. Swallow, you think about the drying areas on your tongue. Part of that thinking will be, as you continue to drink, is it stacking or is it there fleetingly? Or does it just stay about the same? Is there aftertaste? This one definitely has aftertaste. And then you're going to look for energetics. What are the energetics? And they're different for everybody. And they're different by varietal. So I don't have a handle yet on these energetics, but I'm gonna get one. I'm gonna take a second sip. And on this one, I'm gonna think about, in addition to verifying what I think I just tasted, I'm gonna focus on aroma and taste itself. Okay, it's your turn. Remember to take good notes on this. Timer is set for 3 minutes. It's 175-degree water. It's already pre-measured to 5 grams. You get 3 good steepings out of this. 1 minute and 50 seconds is the second, and 2 minutes is the third. So you get out bag number 1 marked Cascade. You go ahead and get your equipment ready. 175-degree water. You can use any temperature when you're heating the cup, making sure that they're clean. But once you go through that, use 175. Not in a hurry, just step by step, make sure you capture everything. It's graceful. It's graceful. Now, while those of you who are going through this or listening to this, I want to remind everybody before I forget. The website before today didn't list any of the upcoming sessions. It now lists the next 4 sessions that are upcoming. All right, put the leaves in the heated cup. You smell. And you've already put the water into the kettle if you have one. And you're going to use the kettle to pour so you can control the flow. And you set your 3 minutes and you hit it. And you heated the receptacle cup. Okay. So I was talking about, say you buy 8 cakes. And by the way, typically they'll be sold in numbers of 8. You would take the first cake, and I was talking about 360 degrees. And if you take about a slice, think of it as a pie. This isn't a pie with a lot of sugar, so you're going to use self-control on how big a slice you're going to cut. So you're going to cut about, or you're going to break off about 1/8 of that pie. That's what you're going to store in your current usage area. The rest, you're going to store, you're going to put away because you're not going to touch it and you're not going to look at it. You're not going to play with it, nothing for the next year. But in the current storage area where you have an 1/8 to a 1/4 slice, and you want to see, well, how's it developing? Easy. Break off a little bit, point, put it in, taste it. Okay, it's developing. I like where it is. So at some point, maybe year 6, you break off a piece. Oh, I don't just like, I love where it is. You know what? I better get off that cake and start serving it to people because I love where it is. So this is the technique, and this is how people control and protect and preserve their stuff. You don't have to put a whole cake out and let it be exposed to all the elements. You just put enough to last a year or 2, and then as you need to supplement, you supplement. And again, just that small piece, rest it goes back into storage. It's so much easier to handle that way. And that's how the pros do it. That's how they do it in tea shops. That's how they do it out in the countryside where they store that stuff. That's how you should do it. All right. So the difference between raw black and fully fermented is deep in your heads now. Most raw black in the market is blended from different areas. That's the market tea. You can drink the market tea, but it's market tea and you'll taste it. It's thin. Unlike these leaves, look at these leaves that are in the water. Don't touch them, don't play with them. But look at the leaves. They're big. Oh, they're whole. That's good. Okay, your timer went off. Separate the tea water from the tea leaves. Instantly, you're struck by several things. Take some good notes about those, and you enter the quality arena. And as you're getting ready to enter the quality arena, you're making sure your color is about like this. Take your time.
Have an early comment. Some of the leaves float. Some of the leaves float on the top of the cup. Some are standing up on the bottom of the cup. So I guess during steeping, it looks so beautiful, but I'm curious, why is that?
This is a great comment. You have leaves at the bottom, you have leaves at the top. I don't know exactly all the factors that create that, but certainly some of the factors are the pick itself. Because when you have more leaves together, that's heavier. If you have just a bud and a leaf or 2, that's lighter. So that's going to tend to float near the top. So that's at least one factor. The other factor may actually be the bud itself, because some of the buds will get up to the top faster than the leaves themselves. So you're right. There is a beauty to these teas, and they're all different because, again, the picks are different. The actual weights of the leaves are different because the trees are of different age, and the varietals are actually different as well. Great question. And it does always remind me as if I'm looking into the ocean or an aquarium, and you see the kelp beds and the seaweed at the bottom, the kelp at the bottom, and then some floating on top. It's just beautiful. Nice, nice aesthetic to this. And this always takes me back to the forest itself, because this forest also has many vigorous streams running through it. Streams that you don't really want to walk through, you want to walk over. It's that much water coming down. But it's just, the sound is beautiful. It's really green in these forests. You've got such a variety of plants, such a variety of plants, lots of interesting bugs. And if you look carefully, in some parts of this forest, you also have snakes. Yes.
Peter shares pleasant thickness, viscosity in the center of my tongue on the first sips. It takes some later sips where I can feel the impact on the sides of the tongue as well.
So Peter gets the impact of this in terms of viscosity, density, pleasantness in the center of his tongue. And it then over a bit goes out to the sides of the tongue. Love this comment, because right away, Peter identified a term which is frequently used with this particular raw black, and that is a density, a viscosity. So there's depth to this tea. This tea is not thin. And the blends and the plantation teas don't have this depth. So this is something, as you identify and go through this process slowly, you suddenly realize, oh yeah, I see what he means. There is depth. Yeah.
Rob says the warmed leaves have a light malt and a hint of sweet chocolate.
Light malt in the warm leaves with a hint of sweet chocolate. And I get that. There's definitely that sweetness for me would almost be overpowering. It's not overpowering, but it's much more than I expect. I don't usually expect to smell leaves like this. And oh my gosh, these are sweet.
He also shares that the steep leaves have an aroma that is a combination, I think that you're saying, Rob, of vegetal and floral, while the scent of the tea water is mellower and leans towards cider and ocean notes.
Cider and ocean notes, in other words, some sort of umami in the actual aroma of the tea liquor, tea water. In a minute, I'll explain why I made that change. Don't worry about that.
And then the steep leaves, an aroma that's vegetal and floral.
Thank you. And the steep leaves, the aroma is vegetal and floral. These are all great catches. And look at how Rob parses this. He starts with the dry leaves, then progresses on to the steep leaves, and then gets to the actual tea water itself. And this is a really great way when you're in tea rhythm, A, to keep track of your notes, and B, to keep track of where you are. Peter did much the same, because right away, instead of talking about flavor, he talked about, what's the weight of this? How do I feel about this in terms of viscosity? These are great approaches to understanding and keeping track. When you do side by side comparisons, this is what we do. We don't just drink and say, oh, that's good. Oh, this is good too. Because all day, that's all we'd be saying. Oh, this is good, that's good. You gotta make these distinctions. The dry leaf sweetness and chocolatiness that Rob brings up, this is important, because maybe this is how you want to approach tea for yourself personally. I want the tea that's got that sweet opening. Or if you have a guest, "Oh, do you have anything that's slightly naturally sweet? And maybe even a little chocolatey?" Oh, well, it turns out I do. Yes.
Another comment, there's a silky mouthfeel and a lovely gentle sweetness.
Silky mouthfeel with a gentle sweetness. And I like this because we've got viscosity. Now we're gonna talk a little bit. Is it cotton viscosity or is it silk viscosity? It's silk. And it's heavy silk, almost like satin. And it's sweet too.
Another comment, this one on energetics. For me, great early energetics centered in and behind my eyes.
Oh, this is really interesting. Early energetics for this commentator in and behind the eyes. And this is a valid comment. You know, people who aren't used to tea would hear that comment and think, what? But that's because they don't have context. That's because they're not steady tea drinkers and they're not looking for energetics. This is why this approach, again, puts you squarely with the tea elite in China, the tea people who are the people in China who are in the tea industry, who understand this stuff and make these distinctions. Love this distinction, yes.
Rob shares that Sue says that this is warm and evocative and makes her think it should be sipped in a leather chair in a room whose walls are lined with books.
So we've got the cloistered scholar feeling in a leather chair, every wall filled with books, with a warmth that's coming from the tea. Did I capture it all?
So,
Okay. And this is, thank you, Sue. Love that comment. And what this is this is a mixture of the energetics and a mixture, because this is the feeling. It's evocative. It's evoking this feeling of being in a really comfortable, grounded place. Love the comment.
another comment, Peter says, when I smelled the dry leaves in the baggie, one part of the aroma had something that reminded me of ancient storage warehouses of teas cultivated by the Brits in the East.
Oh, that's interesting. So this is interesting for a lot of reasons. Peter talks about the initial aroma reminding him of warehouses. And this must be descriptions of warehouses in Britain in the past when they brought tea over. And this is a really interesting comment because actually, the comment revolves around this sense that we always get when we go out to the tea fields themselves. Because when we go out to the tea fields themselves, they've got their storehouses and they're extremely, extremely aromatic. And so this is this comment really about how aromatic this is. And if you're not looking for it, it's terrible because you miss this whole layer of interestingness. All right. Great commentary. You can see why we picked Cascade. You can see why we picked it up. Because when we tasted this, this is different from plantation tea. It's markedly different from plantation tea.
One more comment from Jonathan. It's juicy. Didn't think I'd use that word, but I keep coming back to it.
Love this comment. Jonathan identified juiciness. And yeah, typically when you're drinking a market raw black, juiciness is the last word that comes to your mind. This is a raw black that Peter led off with. There's a viscosity. Rob talked about a sweetness. And when you get sweetness and viscosity together, you get juiciness. And it does have a juiciness almost as if it's a cider type of juiciness. Great commentary from everybody. I really enjoy the fact that your commentary so reminds me of what the Chinese themselves would say. And these are Chinese within the tea industry. Next week, we'll talk a little bit about why I'm using the term tea water instead of tea liquor. Both terms are okay, but tea water is closer to what the Chinese would say. And we'll talk about that next week. Next week, Newman. This thing was put, it's a cake tea. It was caked in 2007. 18 years old. You get a chance of the raw black that's kind of moving its way through the process. So, your responsibility this week, stay healthy, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.
There.